How's it going, everyone? Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau recently resigned as head of the Liberal Party. This resignation follows a public opinion poll that was recently released, which makes it very clear as to why he resigned, and it has a lot of other interesting bits of information. We're going to look at these polling results and discuss the details. So, before we get into the public opinion polls, we're going to see the recent seat projections. This is as of January 5th. So, in Canada, elections are a parliamentary system where everyone votes for who they want representing their electoral district. Each electoral district is tied to a seat in Parliament. So the party that wins the most seats, their leader becomes the Prime Minister. So when we look at the projections right now, we see that the Conservative Party would be getting 236 seats if the election were held today. Now in Canadian Parliament, you need 172 seats for majority. 236 is much higher than that. So Conservatives are projected to win a large majority of seats in Parliament. But that's not the surprising part. This has been projected for a while. What is the surprising part is look at the second place party. That is the Bloc Québécois. They would get the official opposition with 45 seats. Now, because Conservatives have majority, whoever's the official opposition really doesn't have that much power, but it shows how far the Liberals and NDP have fallen. Now, why are we considering the NDP? Well, in the last Canadian election, Liberals won more seats than anyone else, but they did not win a majority of the seats. So they made an alliance with the NDP. That stands for New Democratic Party. It is a farther left-wing party, farther left-wing than the Liberals. So they made a deal with the NDP. Liberal and NDP seats combined after the previous election created a majority, and so that was the governing coalition in Canada. The NDP supported the Liberals to stay in power, and in exchange for that, the Liberals gave the NDP some favors, supported policies the NDP liked, that sort of thing. So look how far both the Liberals and the NDP have fallen below the Bloc Québécois. Now, what makes that especially significant is that the Bloc Québécois are kind of a French nationalist separatist party in the Canadian province of Quebec. It's unclear whether they actually want to separate from Canada, but they want to create conditions where separation is a practical option. And if you look at a map of Canada, this is Quebec right here, like the light blue region, QC. And it's a very large region, and it separates the east coast of Canada from the rest of the country. It also has one of Canada's largest cities, Montreal. So Quebec separatism is not some small thing. Now imagine a situation where the official opposition are a party that is focused on the interests of just one province. And it's sort of a separatist party. Okay? Now the news here isn't just the increase in popularity of the Bloc Québécois, but that the Liberals and NDP dropped so much in the polls that they're projected to win less seats than the Bloc Québécois. Usually in Canada, the top two parties are the Conservatives and the Liberals in first and second place in whatever order, and then the NDP is typically third place. And that is very different from what we see now with Liberals and NDP falling below the Bloc Québécois. So that is noteworthy. Now, let's get into the recent poll results. Okay, this is the Angus Reid poll. It was conducted around December 29th, 2024. And the sample size is just over 2,000, 2,261. Okay, now it looks like a big number. It's not that big, actually. It's not too small, but it's not too big. And here's why. Canada is a large country with you could say five different major population centers. And they are the West Coast, right here, the Prairies, right here, Ontario, Quebec, and the East Coast. So you have 5 different population centers. What is about 2,000 divided by 5? That is 400. Okay? Now, it doesn't mean that there are exactly 400 people polled from each of these population centers, but it's roughly 400 probably, maybe half of it, maybe twice that amount, probably not too much different from 400. Okay? So you imagine, one province that has a major city and a bunch of suburbs and a bunch of rural areas. You're asking 400 people from that entire region or from that entire province. That's actually not too many people. So you want to keep that in mind. Now, if we do look at these seat projections one more time, you'll also notice that Conservatives are winning the most seats in almost every single Canadian province. Every single Canadian province, except for Quebec, has Conservatives winning more seats than anyone else. Quebec has the Bloc Québécois winning the most seats. If you look at Canadian territories, if you include the 3 territories along with the 10 provinces, then out of the 13 provinces and territories, you have 10 of them giving Conservatives the most seats and 3 giving the most seats to, the Bloc Québécois in Quebec and the NDP in the 2 northern territories here. Okay, again, if you just look at the provinces, 9 out of 10 provinces give Conservatives the most seats. So, back to the poll. The margin of error is about 2%, right? 19 times out of 20, which is 95%. Okay, so what that means is that whatever number you see here when we're talking about popular opinion, the actual polling result is plus or minus 2% from that. So for example, here we see 45% of Canadians support the Conservative Party. What that actually means, plus or minus 2. So from 43 to 47% of Canadians support the Conservatives, and there's a 95% chance of that. Okay, so what this means, there's a 95% chance that from 43 to 47% of Canadians support Conservatives. There's a 95% chance that from 19 to 23% of Canadians support the NDP. 95% chance that from 14 to 18% of Canadians support the Liberals, and so on, right? So every percent result here, you want to add and subtract about 2% to see what the actual prediction is. So if 2 results are within 2% of one another, it means it's basically the same result. Okay, we are going to keep that in mind. Now here we have a paragraph comparing these results to the previous Angus Reid poll, which shows us the change. So the Conservative Party climbed 2 points from 43% to 45%. That is within the margin of error. It's actually pretty much equal to the margin of error, 2%. So is it a change? Is it not? Well, if it's a significant change, it's a very small significant change in the upward direction. The New Democratic Party is up 1 point, which is less than the margin of error. So the New Democratic Party, basically their support stayed the same. And the Liberal Party lost 4 points from 20% support to 16% support. 4 points is larger than the margin of error, so that is a significant drop, right? So we see that the New Democratic Party stayed about the same. Liberal Party lost popularity. Conservative Party may have gained a little bit of popularity, okay? So looking at these results here, so 45% support Conservatives, 21% support NDP, 16% support Liberals. Liberals have dropped to 3rd place. 16 is much less than 45%. Okay, and that is Trudeau's party, the Liberal Party, right? So not only is it far below the Conservatives, it's not even 2nd place to the Conservatives in terms of public opinion. If we add the NDP and Liberal supporters, okay, so all the left-wing supporters added together, we get 37%. 37 is still a lot less than 45. So this ruling coalition, Liberals and NDP, has really, really lost support. Okay, now let's get into the details. When we break it down by region, what we see is in practically every single region of Canada, the Conservatives are significantly more popular than the Liberals and the NDP as well. Okay, if we look at Atlantic Canada, 44% support the Conservatives. Liberals are far below that at 30%. NDP farther below that at 18%. It is worth noting, though, that in Atlantic Canada, this is the East Coast, if you add Liberal and NDP support, you do get 48, which is a little bit higher than 44. In Quebec, well, the Bloc Québécois have the highest amount of support, 47, but Conservatives are second place with 24. If we add Liberal and NDP support, we get 24. We get 24, which is tied with what the Conservatives have, right? In Ontario, and we're going to see this trend everywhere else we look. Okay, in Ontario, Conservatives have 48%. Liberals drop to third place. NDP and Liberals combined is 44%, less than what the Conservatives have. In Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Conservatives have 59%. Liberals in third place. NDP and Liberals combined gives us 37%, which again is substantially less than the support Conservatives have. In Alberta, Conservatives have 61% of the vote, NDP 25%, Liberals third place with 8% of the vote. Adding the two together gives us 33%, substantially less than what the Conservatives have. British Columbia, 54% of the vote going to Conservatives, NDP 26%, Liberals 14%, again Liberals third place. If you add NDP and Liberals, you get 40% of the vote, which is again substantially less than the 54% that the Conservatives enjoy there. So whether you're looking at the West Coast, British Columbia, the Prairies, Alberta, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, or Ontario, you see that not only are Conservatives way ahead, not only have Liberals dropped to third place, but if you add the Liberal and NDP votes, or the Liberal and NDP support, you still have less than how much the Conservatives have. All right. And what we see in Quebec and Atlantic Canada, well, in Quebec, Bloc Québécois are ahead. Conservatives are still beating Liberals and NDP substantially. And same in Atlantic Canada, Conservatives are still ahead of Liberals and NDP substantially. Now, let's get into more details. When we look at male and female voters, when we look at voters of different ages, interesting things happen. So, for both male and female voters, Conservatives are the most popular party. Okay? But there is a significant difference here. For male voters, 53% support the Conservatives. That's a majority. NDP and Liberals are pretty close. 16%, 13%, way less than 53%. Almost a tie, right? 3% difference. And if we add the two, we get 29%, which is still substantially less than the 53% enjoyed by the Conservatives. When we look at female voters, yes, Conservatives are the most popular party, 37%, but NDP and Liberals do have more support than when you look at males, right? 37 is much less than 53. 27% is much bigger than 16. 19% is significantly bigger than 13. And if we add 27 and 19, we exceed this 37% of the vote enjoyed by Conservatives. So among female voters, there actually is more left-wing support than right-wing support. But that left-wing support is split between the Liberals and NDP, and so Conservatives end up having more support than anyone else. Now let's look at it broken down by age group. Okay, so when we look at the breakdown by age group, we have 18 to 34-year-olds here, 35 to 54-year-olds here, and 55 plus here. Okay, so for 18 to 34-year-olds, it's practically a tie, right? 37%, 36%. Remember, margin of error is 2%, so Conservatives and NDP are tied. 35 to 54 64-year-olds. Conservatives are way ahead with 47% of the vote. NDP at 22, Liberals third place at 13. If we add Liberals and NDP, we have 35, which is much less than 47. 55 plus, again, Conservatives way ahead at 48. Liberals second at 19, then Bloc Québécois, then NDP at 14. If we add Liberal and NDP support, again, we get much less than that 48% that the Conservatives enjoy. But notice the trend here, okay? So Conservatives are way ahead for 55 plus and for 35 to 54-year-olds. So basically 35 plus, Conservatives are way ahead, right? But they are still kind of tied for first place for 18 to 34-year-olds, but with 36% of the vote, right? Significantly less than that 47-48. Look what's happening with the NDP. 55 plus, 14% of the vote. 35 to 54-year-olds, 22% of the vote. And that's a lot higher than 14. And 18 to 34-year-olds, 37% of the vote. Tied for first place with the Conservatives. That's a lot higher than 22. So as people get younger, they are more likely to support the NDP. Liberal support doesn't change that much based on age. 14, 13, yeah, among the older crowd, you have a little bit more Liberal support, 19 instead of 13 or 14. So that is a noteworthy trend there when we look at NDP support among the younger people. But what we see everywhere here is that in every single category, with the exception of Quebec, Conservatives are ahead, right? That's the one thing we see, right? In all the different regions of Canada, for both male and female voters, and by age. The only exception is for 18 to 34-year-olds. Conservatives are tied not with the Liberals, but with NDP. And for Quebec, the Bloc Québécois are ahead more than anyone else, although Conservatives still come in second place. What we also notice is NDP being second place instead of third place, okay, more often than the Liberals. With male-female voters, again, NDP is second place. And it's when we look at age, NDP is doing better than Liberals. So not only are Conservatives far ahead, but also it looks like the Liberals have surpassed, or the NDP has surpassed the Liberals as the go-to left-wing party. And again, if we go to the main public opinion poll here, we see that here, right? NDP at 21%, Liberals at 16%. Now, why would that happen? Well, Liberals used to be viewed as the center-left party, with Conservatives viewed as the center-right party. And some people still view it that way, but others view Liberals as a farther left-wing party now, in part because of Trudeau's policies and in part because of the Liberal alliance with the NDP and people feeling like the NDP has had too much influence over the Liberals. So, what happened then to those who supported the Liberals? Well, those who were center-left and now feel, oh, Liberals are farther left now, they may decide, well, I'll change my mind and I'll vote for the center-right party because I'm more of a centrist. Whereas people who are more farther left and were supporting Liberals because they thought, well, the NDP can't win anyways, so I'll vote for the center-left party. Well, if they feel like, well, these are both farther left-wing parties now, well, then I'll just vote for the one that's actually the farther left-wing party, the NDP. That explains why a lot of Liberal supporters would have jumped ship to either the Conservatives or the NDP, and we will see details on that right now. Now, here we have scenarios, and now we really get into seeing why Trudeau resigned. Okay, scenarios to consider about the political situation in Canada. Okay, this poll is from late December, and people were asked, okay, they were categorized as to what party they support, and they're asked, would you like, okay, this is the dark blue, Justin Trudeau remain as Prime Minister for as long as his party is able to hold on to power? The gray, Justin Trudeau calls a general election immediately, and the red, Justin Trudeau announces his resignation immediately after the new year, resulting in a Liberal leadership contest, which is exactly what happened. Okay, Look at the Liberal Party, Justin Trudeau's party. 59% want him to resign and call a Liberal leadership race. That's within his own party. In his allied party here, the NDP, even more, 65% want him to resign and call a leadership race. Okay. Now, interestingly enough, for the Conservatives, only 27% want him to resign, 66% want an election right away. But look at Liberals and NDP. Even for them, 12% and 14%, these are not negligible figures. Even they want an election right away, even though they know that they will lose that election and Conservatives will get majority. Now, let's look at some more numbers here. Okay, so this is the approval of Trudeau as Prime Minister. Okay, by 2021 federal vote. So Trudeau's declining popularity is evident when canvassing those who voted for him in 2021. Okay, so now we're looking at how people voted in 2021 and categorizing them based on that. Okay, so among those who voted Conservatives, of course, 90% see him as, well, they strongly disapprove. Okay, but look at those who voted Liberal. All right, 25% strongly disapprove, 26% moderately disapprove. Okay, so that's a majority. That's 51%. Okay, so the majority of those who voted Liberal in the last election, they disapprove, either moderately or strongly, they disapprove of Justin Trudeau. That is a significant figure as well. And among the NDP, it's even more than that, okay, who disapprove of him. Okay, moving on. Okay, here we go. These are interesting figures right here. And they're looking at male and female voters, but also categorized by age. Okay, now let's look at the male voters here. Okay, Conservative Party support. Okay, 53% of 18 to 34-year-old males, 53% of 35 to 54-year-old males, 57% of 55-plus-year-old males. So for every age category for males, the Conservatives are by far the most popular party, but we do see a trend that older males tend to like Conservatives even more. Now, let's look at females, okay, and Conservatives. 18 to 34-year-old females, 27% only. Only 27% support the Conservatives. 35 to 54-year-old females, 41%. 55-plus-year-old females, 39%. Okay, so 41, 39, again, it's pretty much the same, right? We have a margin of error of just over 2%. But when you look at 18 to 34-year-old females, it's a much smaller number, 27%. Okay, and it's actually the NDP who has more support than anyone else for 18 to 34-year-old females. Notice that of these 6 categories, all right, of these 6 categories, so male, female, and each being broken down into 18 to 34-year-olds, 35 to 54-year-olds, and 55 plus, of these 6 categories, in every single one, Conservatives get more support than anyone else, except for 18 to 34-year-old females, where the NDP actually has more support than anyone else. And again, Liberals look like they've become irrelevant. Look, Liberal Party, 16%, 13, well, 16 is the total here, right? So 13, 13, 14, 15, 14. It's all pretty much the same, except females, 55 plus. Then they tend to like Liberals the most, but even then it's still, like they like Liberals more than the other demographic categories here, but still it's only 24%, right? So looking at the details of this data here, it again looks like the Liberals have become very much less relevant than before. Now, going back to Conservatives versus NDP, right? We said that for all age groups, males and females, everyone likes Conservatives more than anyone else, except for females 18 to 34. And people often like to ask why. Okay, people ask, okay, why are females 18 to 34 so much drawn to the NDP? The correct way to ask that is actually to ask 2 different questions, maybe 3 different questions, okay? Because remember the data we looked at over here. When we just look at male and female voters, females tend to support the NDP more than males. Okay, even though both groups like conservatives more than anyone else, right? NDP is substantially more popular among females than males. When we look at age, okay, the younger someone is, the more likely they are to support the NDP. Again, conservatives have first place for all three of the age categories, right? But 18 to 34-year-olds, they're actually tied for first place with conservatives. And then the older category has a little bit less NDP support, and the oldest category has even less NDP support. So we have two different trends here. We have younger people tend to prefer the NDP, and we have females tend to like the NDP more than males. So it's two phenomena happening here. Compare males to females in the same age group. Look at 55 plus. 57% of males support conservatives, but only 39% of females. 35 to 54. 53% of males support conservatives, but only 41% of females. So even in the age groups where both males and females like conservatives more than anyone else, males do prefer conservatives even more than females. And of course, 18 to 34, we have 43% of males versus 27% of females supporting conservatives. Look at the NDP, 55 plus, 13% of males support versus 16% of females. 35 to 54, 14% of males support versus 31% of females. And for 18 to 34-year-olds, 28% of males versus 48% of females. So for males, 35 plus, the support is pretty much the same for the NDP. It's barely there. And then for the youngest category of males, you have a higher amount, right? 28% support the NDP. For females, as they get younger, support for NDP increases. So again, it is two different phenomena combined. What's true about females who are 18 to 34 years old? Well, two things are true. One, they are female. Two, they are 18 to 34 years old, right? So we have the intersection of both of these phenomena, right? Younger people liking NDP more than older people, and females liking NDP more than males. So it's actually two different questions to answer if you are wondering why. You could say maybe there's a third question here. Is there some third phenomena which is specific to 18 to 34-year-old females, which is separate than from the phenomena of females having more of a preference for NDP than males, separate from the phenomena of younger people having more of a preference for NDP than older people? And I think it's also important to note here that it may not necessarily be a preference for NDP. It might just be a left-wing preference. Why we see it happening with the NDP rather than towards the Liberals is what we talked about before. A lot of people used to see Liberals as center-left. Now they see them as just left-wing and not being centrist. And with that change, the more center-left people may have shifted to Conservatives, viewing them as center-right. And the more farther left-wing people decided, okay, well, if there is no center-left party that's likely to win, I'll just support the farther left-wing party, right? So it may not be an NDP preference, might just be left-wing preference. Now, in terms of younger people supporting the left wing, this phenomena is seen through many different generations in many different countries. There's actually a separate video I have, which is on graphing the political spectrum, and we get a little bit into that, and I'll put a link for that into the description. As a short explanation, the left-wing position tends to be that the government should provide more for the people, whereas the right-wing position is more along the lines of, well, the people should provide for themselves and the government should create conditions where people have the rights and the opportunities to provide for themselves, right? So if we really simplify the positions of the two sides of the political spectrum in that manner, well, younger people, they don't have as much money, they don't have as much experience, it's more difficult for them to provide for themselves, so it's natural to think that, oh, the government providing for everyone, that makes sense, right? As people get older, they have more money, more resources, more experience, and they're more likely to develop an idea or an ideology of, well, I'd rather just arrange my own things and provide for myself and not rely on the government to manage things for me. I think I'll do a better job managing things for me, right? So that makes sense. When it comes to females preferring the NDP, that's more difficult to explain because it might not be a universal thing, right? There's some information suggesting that it used to be the other way around a couple generations ago, that females actually used to be more right-wing than males. So that phenomenon is actually more difficult to explain. But if you want to look into it, I mean, go ahead, right? Probably an interesting question to look into. Here we have the federal vote retention compared to 2021, okay? So this is asking people, first of all, who they voted for in 2021 and who they plan on voting for now. So when you look at the Conservative Party, 89% of those who voted for them last election plan on still voting for them. Second biggest category is 4% here who are voting for Bloc Québécois, okay? Look what's going on with the Liberals. Only 41% of those who voted Liberals last election plan on continuing to vote Liberals. 41%. That's a minority. Okay? 20% of former Liberal supporters are now voting NDP. 16% of former Liberal supporters are now voting Conservative. Again, this is that phenomena that we were talking about. Okay? The Liberal Party is losing votes to the NDP and the Conservatives. Okay? For NDP, 68% of those who voted NDP are still voting NDP. Interestingly enough, the second largest category here is 10%. So 10% of people who voted for NDP have actually switched over to the Conservatives. Okay, so this is the farther left-wing party. 10% of their former supporters are now voting for the center right-wing party. That's an interesting phenomenon. So all of this comes together to really show us the conditions in Canada that led to Trudeau deciding to resign. And until next time, enjoy.